Agatha Raisin and the Midnight Postbox Mystery. Good evening from our village, where gossip travels faster than the mail. Where are you listening from today? We love hearing from all our listeners. Don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the next bit of mischief. Chapter 1. A Peculiar Discovery in Carsely. The soft chime of midnight echoed through the quiet village of Carsely, slipping past the shutters of Agatha Raisin's cosy cottage. She stirred in her bed, her sleep light and easily broken, as a faint, scratching sound reached her ears. At first, she assumed it was the wind teasing the garden, but the rhythm was deliberate, too precise, too intentional to be dismissed. Heart-quickening, she swung her legs over the side of the bed, pulling on her slippers. The cool wooden floor beneath her feet grounded her, a familiar contrast to the faint tremor of excitement fluttering in her chest. Peering through the lace-curtained window, Agatha squinted into the garden. Moonlight spilled across the cobblestones, illuminating the neat rows of her tulips and the circular stone path that led to her modest postbox. There it was again, a subtle rustle, a scraping sound, as if tiny fingers were sliding something across the surface. Her curiosity, always a trait she prided herself on, surged. She grabbed her cardigan and tiptoed toward the door, the familiar click of the latch echoing like a promise of discovery. Outside, the night was crisp and scented faintly of dew and wood smoke. Carsely's cottages, each with their tidy hedges and glowing windows, appeared asleep, peaceful and undisturbed. Yet something about the stillness felt uneasy, as though the village itself were holding its breath. Agatha approached the postbox, her steps cautious but deliberate. She knelt and saw, to her surprise, a small pile of letters, their envelopes plain and unmarked, lying neatly on the flagstone beneath the mailbox. No names, no stamps, nothing to indicate sender or recipient, just folded paper, waiting to whisper secrets to anyone bold enough to read them. Agatha's fingers tingled with anticipation as she picked up the first envelope. It was crisp, the paper faintly scented with lavender, as though the writer had taken care in preparing it. She turned it over, inspecting for clues, but found only her own reflection in the dim moonlight and the faint impression of handwriting inside. Her mind raced. Who would deliver letters in the dead of night? And why leave them unmarked, as if to hide them in plain sight? The possibilities sprawled in her imagination like the twisting lanes of Carsely itself. Misunderstandings, secret admirers, or perhaps something more clandestine. A sudden rustle from the far hedge made her freeze. Agatha's eyes darted to the shadows, alert for any movement. A fox, a cat, or something more deliberate? The wind shifted, carrying a faint scent of damp earth and the faintest hint of perfume. Someone or something was near. She held her breath, letting the silence stretch and settle around her, each heartbeat loud and insistent. Yet when she leaned closer to the postbox, there was nothing, only the moonlight and the neatly arranged letters mocking her suspense. Agatha straightened and allowed herself a small, satisfied smile. This was the sort of puzzle she lived for, a mystery wrapped in the simplest of packages. The village seemed to exhale around her, settling once more into quiet slumber, while she carefully gathered the letters, tucking them into her cardigan pocket. She knew she would examine them properly under the warm glow of her lamp, with a steaming cup of tea by her side. But for now, the thrill of the midnight discovery lingered, a gentle shiver of curiosity and expectation. Something had started tonight, something small yet insistent, and Agatha Raisin, ever alert and clever, was already a step ahead. As she closed the door behind her, the village returned to its serene, shadowed hush. The postbox stood empty beneath the moon, holding no evidence of the strange, unseen visitor who had left the letters. And somewhere in Carsely, perhaps someone watched, perhaps someone waited, their motives hidden as carefully as the secrets now in Agatha's hands. Agatha settled into her favourite armchair, the soft glow of the brass lamp spilling across the pages of the mysterious letters. The warmth of the room contrasted with the cool night pressing against her windows, and the gentle ticking of the mantel clock offered a comforting rhythm as she began her examination. One by one, she unfolded the envelopes, each revealing pale, crisp paper with delicate handwriting, slightly slanted as if penned in a hurry. The words themselves were cryptic, fragments of sentences and shorthand notes that hinted at meetings, warnings, and unspoken agreements. The first letter contained only a few lines. "Meet at the willow tree. Do not mention to Mrs. Pendleton. Midnight." Agatha raised an eyebrow. Willow tree. There was only one in Carsely, by the edge of the small pond near the old mill. And Mrs. Pendleton, a notorious gossip, was a fixture in village life, always sniffing out secrets. This little piece of information, so brief and innocent-seeming, suggested someone was moving carefully, trying not to be noticed. Agatha's pulse quickened, not with fear, exactly, but with the thrill of unravelling the invisible threads connecting the village's quiet corners. The second letter was more puzzling. Scattered phrases jumped across the page. Red gate. Lantern. Thursday. Caution. Lost key. Agatha leaned closer, her glasses catching the lamp's reflection. Who carried a lost key to a red gate? And why emphasize caution in such cryptic terms? She scribbled notes on a small pad, mapping connections between the letters, noticing repeated references to certain streets, cottages, and even minor village landmarks. Every sentence hinted at movement, secrets, and perhaps even hidden dangers. As she worked through the letters, Agatha began recognizing familiar handwriting, fragments, hints, and stylistic quirks that suggested more than one correspondent. Some letters bore the careful, looping script of a meticulous mind. Others were jagged, hurried, almost frantic. The variation made her think of contrasting personalities in Carsely, some cautious and precise, others impetuous and emotional. Each note became a small window into the lives of villagers she knew, yet never truly understood in depth. She paused to gaze out her window, where moonlight silvered the garden. The roses, still heavy with dew, glistened like scattered jewels in the soft night. A lone owl called from a distant tree, and the faint rustle of leaves reminded her of the midnight visit that had sparked this investigation. The juxtaposition of calm beauty outside and the intricate mystery in her hands made the night feel electric, a cozy tension that promised discovery. A third letter contained something even more perplexing, a sequence of numbers and letters. B14, C7 2211, Agatha hummed softly, fingers tracing the lines of text. Could these be locations, times, or perhaps some form of code? Her mind raced, assembling possibilities like pieces of a jigsaw puzzle, each fragment offering a tantalizing hint, but never the full picture. The sense of secrecy and hidden movement across Carsely grew stronger with every note she examined. By the time Agatha had worked through the pile, she had sketched a rough map, connecting names, times, and landmarks. The letters were threads in a delicate web, small clues teasing a narrative she had yet to see fully. She sipped her tea, the warmth flowing through her as her mind pieced together faint patterns, subtle connections, and hints of intrigue. Somewhere in the village, someone was orchestrating these clandestine communications, and Agatha, with her keen eye and restless curiosity, was determined to follow them wherever they led. Finally, she arranged the letters neatly on the coffee table, their edges aligned like a deck of secrets awaiting revelation. Outside, the garden lay calm under the moon, silver and serene. Inside, Agatha felt a mixture of anticipation and contentment. The village was quiet, the night still, but the letters promised that tomorrow, or perhaps the night after, Carsely would stir with mysteries she intended to uncover. Chapter 2. Whispers Among the Villagers. The morning air was crisp and fragrant, carrying the faint aroma of freshly baked bread from the village bakery. Agatha Raisin stepped out of her cottage, pulling her light coat snug around her shoulders. Carsely was waking slowly. Smoke curled from chimneys, and the distant clatter of milk bottles being delivered echoed down the cobbled streets. She adjusted her scarf and set off along the winding path, her mind still swirling with thoughts of the mysterious letters she had discovered the night before. As she passed the corner by Mrs. Pendleton's neat hedge, she caught the edge of a conversation. The older woman was bustling with excitement, speaking rapidly to Mr. Tilling, the village grocer, whose spectacles kept sliding down his nose.
And the letters.
Did you hear?
Someone's leaving them at all hours.
Mrs. Pendleton's voice was a mix of scandalized delight and genuine curiosity. Agatha slowed her pace, pretending to inspect a nearby flower box while eavesdropping. Mr. Tilling shook his head, a bemused frown creasing his forehead.
I heard they're unmarked, yes?
Just appearing as if by magic.
Carsely isn't used to mysteries. He chuckled nervously, glancing around as if the letters themselves might be watching.
Agatha suppressed a smile. Magic was certainly one word for it, though she preferred clever subterfuge. Moving further along, she passed the post office where a small crowd had gathered. Whispers fluttered through the air like restless birds. Villagers exchanged half-sentences. Seen near the willow tree?
Could it be someone from the mill? I wouldn't trust young Oliver.
Each snippet offered a glimpse into the village's collective imagination, a patchwork of fear, gossip, and speculation.
Agatha's lips quirked into a knowing smile.
It was fascinating how quickly news, or rumour, spread in a place like Carsely, and how easily people wove their own stories into every bare fact. She nodded politely to Mrs. Tilling, who was arranging a basket of apples and muttering about nonsense and mischief. The grocer's daughter, shy and wide-eyed, darted glances at Agatha as if seeking reassurance. Agatha's thoughts flicked to the letters, wondering which villagers were truly involved and which were merely caught up in imagination and conjecture. Every interaction felt like a clue, every casual remark a potential thread in the village's intricate web of secrets. As she approached the small square, Agatha noticed the baker kneeling dough while chatting with the blacksmith. Their conversation, too, held hints of intrigue, though neither realized Agatha was listening.
I heard footsteps near the postbox, the baker whispered, leaning closer.
But no one's been caught.
Strange, isn't it?
The blacksmith shrugged, hammer in hand. If it's mischief, it's clever. And no harm done, really. Makes the nights interesting. Agatha's smile widened. Clever mischief indeed, but in her experience, clever mischief often hid something more substantial. The streets of Carsely, bathed in soft sunlight, seemed peaceful and ordinary, yet Agatha could sense the tension threading beneath the surface. A cat slinked across the cobbles, weaving between the villagers' legs, and a small child skipped by, oblivious to the adults' whispered speculations. The charm of village life, she thought, was that every detail mattered. The flowers, the fences, even the way someone tied their scarf. Each could provide insight, if observed carefully. By the time she reached the edge of the village pond, Agatha had taken mental notes of every conversation, gesture, and glance. The letter's impact on Carsely was evident. Curiosity had transformed into mild unease, and gentle suspicion danced in every eye. She paused, inhaling the fresh morning air, savouring the quiet energy of the village awakening. Carsely was a small place, but its inhabitants were delightfully intricate, each carrying secrets, opinions, and stories that intertwined in unexpected ways. With a quiet chuckle, Agatha continued toward her cottage, mind alight with possibilities. The morning had revealed much, yet concealed even more. Someone, or several people, was moving carefully through her village, leaving hints, provocations, and unanswered questions. And Agatha, keen-eyed and ever observant, intended to uncover them all. Agatha Raisin strolled toward the post office the following morning, her senses unusually alert. The village was calm, bathed in gentle sunlight, yet something in the air prickled her curiosity. As she approached the familiar red brick building, she noticed a figure leaning against the far wall, half hidden in shadow. The stranger was dressed in a muted coat, their hat pulled low, obscuring most of their features. They shifted restlessly, glancing down the street and then back at the post office, as if ensuring no one was watching too closely. Agatha's brow arched. Most villagers were known quantities. their habits predictable. This figure, however, moved with careful purpose, hesitant but deliberate, and decidedly out of place. She slowed her pace, pretending to inspect the notice board with its pinned announcements while studying the stranger. Every tiny gesture, the tap of a gloved finger against a lapel, the subtle glance over a shoulder, spoke to her trained eye. Someone was hiding something. The stranger's behavior grew more peculiar as the minutes passed. They crouched briefly to examine the cobblestones near the postbox, straightened abruptly, and muttered under their breath.
Agatha's mind raced.
Was this related to the letters she had discovered? The timing and location seemed too coincidental. Her fingers itched for a notebook, for the pen tucked into her cardigan, but she restrained herself, preferring subtle observation over immediate confrontation. A gentle wind ruffled the stranger's coat, and they glanced again at the street. Then, without warning, they straightened, adjusted their hat, and moved off down a side lane. Agatha's curiosity sharpened into focus. They hadn't fled in panic, yet their departure was purposeful, almost secretive. She made a discreet note of their direction, memorizing the turn they had taken, the color of the coat, and the faint scent of cedar that lingered as they passed. Every detail might prove valuable later. As the stranger disappeared around the corner, the villagers resumed their routines, unaware of the small tension that had just passed through the square. Mrs. Pendleton bustled by with her basket, humming a tune while the grocer arranged his morning deliveries. The contrast between ordinary life and the brief appearance of the enigmatic visitor heightened the sense of intrigue for Agatha. She sipped her tea from a thermos she carried, eyes following the empty lane where the figure had vanished, pondering motives and possibilities. She returned to the post office, pretending to collect a few envelopes, all the while keeping mental notes. The stranger's movements suggested careful planning and awareness of their surroundings. Who were they? And what were they doing near the postbox at odd hours? Were they the same person who had delivered the mysterious letters, or merely an observer, someone curious or cautious? Agatha scribbled discreetly on the corner of her notepad, jotting impressions, gestures, and questions that might later form a clearer picture. The village itself seemed to exhale, the ordinary sounds of daily life contrasting sharply with the tiny pulse of suspense that lingered in the square. Agatha leaned lightly against the counter, eyes sweeping the rooftops and streets, imagining possible scenarios. Perhaps the visitor had allies, perhaps secrets, perhaps intentions she had yet to uncover. Every element of their brief appearance hinted at layers beneath the surface of Carsely's seemingly tranquil life. Finally, she stepped back onto the cobbled street, letting her gaze linger on the empty spot where the stranger had stood. The post office door swung gently behind her, the bells tinkling softly. Agatha smiled faintly, a spark of excitement warming her. The night's letters had been only the beginning. The village had revealed a new player in the unfolding story, someone whose motives remained hidden, but whose presence promised that the web of intrigue was expanding. And Agatha, ever curious and meticulously observant, was ready to follow it wherever it might lead. Chapter 3. Clues in the garden. The first light of dawn painted Carsely in a soft golden haze. Agatha Raisin stepped out into her garden, inhaling the crisp scent of dew-soaked earth and the faint aroma of early blossoms. Her slippers sank slightly into the cool, damp grass as she walked toward the postbox, her eyes scanning every corner with the careful attention of a seasoned observer. The village seemed still, almost reverent in the early morning glow, yet something in the air hinted that the night had left its mark. Near the postbox,
Agatha knelt, her gloved fingers brushing over small indentations in the soft soil.
Footprints, delicate yet deliberate, marred the otherwise immaculate path. She traced their pattern with her eyes, noting the size, direction, and the subtle twist of the soles, imagining the figure who had left them. The prints suggested someone had paused, knelt perhaps, and moved with caution.
Agatha's mind raced, connecting the footprints to the mysterious letters she had discovered.
Someone had visited the postbox under cover of darkness, leaving behind these silent signatures of their presence. Her gaze shifted to the flower beds lining the garden path. The tulips and roses were slightly disturbed, petals scattered as if brushed aside or stepped upon. A few blooms bent unnaturally, their stems broken or pressed into the damp earth. Agatha crouched, gently lifting a rose to inspect it. There was no sign of hurried escape, no mud tracked inside her cottage, but the subtle disorder hinted at urgency, a brief struggle, or the hurried attention of a careful visitor. Each detail deepened the sense of mystery, transforming her garden from a peaceful retreat into a stage of unseen events. As she moved among the flower beds, Agatha noted other minor signs: a bent garden stake here, a faint smear of soil there. These small irregularities were clues, delicate threads weaving together a story she was eager to interpret. She imagined the visitor's path, the careful hands placing or retrieving letters, the quiet vigilance as they ensured they went unnoticed. Every detail seemed intentional, a careful choreography performed beneath the quiet veil of night. Agatha jotted mental notes, forming a narrative from footprints and petals, each mark revealing fragments of purpose. The morning air carried the soft chirping of birds, a gentle contrast to the tension she felt in her chest. Bees moved lazily between the lavender bushes, and the leaves rustled softly in the breeze, masking any sound the visitor might have made. The sensory richness of the garden, the damp earth, the floral fragrances, the warmth of rising sunlight, provided a comforting backdrop to the intrigue unfolding beneath her gaze. Agatha appreciated the duality of the scene, a tranquil garden layered with the quiet signs of secret activity. Pausing by the postbox, she knelt again, comparing the footprints to the sketches she had made in her notepad. Some aligned with the timing suggested by the letters, others hinted at additional visits she had not anticipated. The pattern was beginning to emerge, though gaps remained.
Agatha's detective instincts buzzed, fueled by curiosity and the satisfaction of uncovering small, hidden truths.
Each petal out of place, each footprint pressed into soil, was a piece of a puzzle, and she delighted in slowly piecing it together. Finally, she stood, brushing soil from her gloves, and allowed herself a quiet moment to enjoy the garden in the morning light. The postbox stood innocently at the edge of the path, yet it was no longer merely a fixture. It had become the focal point of secrets, a silent witness to events she was only beginning to understand. With a soft sigh of contentment and anticipation, Agatha stepped back toward her cottage, determined to examine the letters again, cross-referencing footprints and disturbed blooms with cryptic messages. Her mind was alive with possibilities, and the garden had offered its first meaningful clues. Agatha Raisin crouched low among the flower beds, eyes scanning the soil for any trace the night's visitor might have left behind. The tulips swayed gently in the morning breeze, and dew clung to petals like tiny jewels. Her fingers brushed against something unusual, a small scrap of paper partially buried beneath a disturbed rosebush. She carefully lifted it, straightening the crumpled edges and smoothing the surface. It was a note, torn along one side, its message incomplete but unmistakably deliberate. The words were cryptic. Meet by the
lantern? Not after dusk?
Bring only... The rest of the note had been ripped away, leaving her imagination to fill in the gaps. Agatha's eyes sparkled with curiosity. Here was proof that the letters were not random, that someone had planned clandestine exchanges using the postbox as a starting point. The torn edges suggested haste or secrecy, or perhaps a failed attempt to conceal the message entirely. She tucked the scrap into her notepad, carefully noting the precise location where she had found it. Her mind raced with possibilities. Who had intended to meet, and why had the note been left behind? The lantern mentioned could refer to the small oil lamp outside the old mill, or perhaps the one near the willow tree by the pond. Each option carried implications, and Agatha's imagination filled in potential scenarios with careful attention to detail. She pictured shadowed figures moving silently, exchanging notes under the watchful eyes of the moon. The partial nature of the message made every step uncertain, and yet irresistibly intriguing. As she examined the garden around her, Agatha noticed subtle signs that reinforced her theories. Petals that had been brushed aside, a faint smear of soil on a stone path, the slight indentation near the postbox. These small markers suggested someone had paused, deliberated and acted with a clear purpose. The garden, tranquil in daylight, now felt like a carefully staged set, each element a clue in a story she was slowly unraveling. The sensory details, the smell of damp earth, the cool touch of dew, the warm sunlight filtering through leaves, grounded her in the scene even as her mind leapt toward speculation. Agatha began cross-referencing the scrap with the letters she had previously examined. Names, locations, and cryptic instructions started to form a pattern, though gaps remained. Each fragment pointed toward a network of secret communications, small yet precise, weaving through Carsely like invisible threads. The thought made her smile faintly. She enjoyed puzzles, and this one was particularly satisfying, blending everyday village life with hidden intrigue. She paused to listen to the garden around her. A bird chirped from a nearby tree. The faint rustle of leaves accompanied a passing breeze, and the distant clatter of a milk delivery cart reminded her that the village's ordinary rhythms continued, oblivious to the quiet drama unfolding in her flower beds. This balance between the serene and the suspenseful was what Agatha relished most, the idea that beneath the calm surface of Carsely, secrets could flourish unnoticed. Waiting for the right eyes to uncover them, carefully she straightened, holding the note between her fingers and turning it over to examine any faint smudges or markings. Even the handwriting offered insight. Small, deliberate loops suggested careful planning, while hurried lines hinted at urgency. Agatha jotted her observations, mentally cataloguing what she knew and what remained hidden. The torn message was a key piece of a larger puzzle, and she could almost see the invisible connections forming across the village, connecting locations, names, and motives. With a quiet sense of anticipation, she placed the note in her notepad and stood, surveying the garden once more. The roses glimmered with dew, the tulips swayed, and the postbox sat silently at the edge of the path. Yet, in Agatha's mind, the scene buzzed with activity, a web of intrigue waiting to be unravelled. She inhaled deeply, savouring the mix of excitement and calm, and with one last glance at the garden, she returned to her cottage, ready to continue piecing together the secrets that Carsely had hidden so carefully. Chapter 4. Midnight Meetings. The night settled over Carsely like a soft, dark blanket, muffling the familiar sounds of the village. Agatha Raisin adjusted her shawl and peered through the branches of a low hedge, her eyes straining to catch movement under the flickering lamplight. The postbox loomed ahead, innocuous in daylight, but now it seemed a beacon for secrets. Her breath misted in the cool air as she crouched, notebook in hand, ready to observe. The thrill of anticipation made her pulse quicken, tempered by the cozy reassurance of knowing she was in her own familiar corner of the world. She had arrived early, hiding behind the hedge with careful precision, and had already catalogued the soft creaks of distant shutters, the occasional scuff of a passing cat, and the rustle of leaves stirred by the gentle breeze. Every sound was amplified in the stillness, keeping her senses alert. Agatha's eyes darted to every shadow, mentally noting shapes and forms that might, or might not, be connected to the letters that had sparked so much mystery. A flicker of movement caught her attention. A figure, draped in a dark coat and hat, emerged from the mist near the postbox. The person moved cautiously, bending slightly to examine the box before producing a small envelope. Agatha's pen hovered over her notebook as she recorded the careful, deliberate gestures, the way the figure folded the envelope, the pause to glance around, the faint tremor of hesitation. Every motion was intentional, almost ritualistic, as though the night itself demanded discretion. Another figure appeared from the opposite side of the street, equally deliberate, their steps muffled by the damp cobblestones. The two exchanged a folded note, hands brushing briefly in a silent acknowledgement.
Agatha's mind raced, cataloguing pattern, time, distance, and the fleeting glances that seemed weighted with meaning. Even in the darkness, subtle cues spoke volumes to her trained eye. Despite the suspense,
Agatha couldn't suppress a tiny smile at her own dramatic posture, crouched and watchful like a novice spy in a storybook. The situation was serious, yet there was a gentle humour in her exaggerated caution, in the way she flinched at an owl's hoot or the sudden sway of a lamppost in the wind. She reminded herself to remain vigilant, though, for the smallest detail might reveal the sender's intentions or the rhythm of their clandestine exchanges. The figures lingered briefly. Then the first moved to deposit another envelope beneath the postbox, pausing to look over a shoulder as though expecting a hidden observer. Agatha noted the angle of the light, the rustle of the figure's coat, and the careful placement of the letters. Each act was deliberate, precise, and filled with purpose. She scribbled mental notes, piecing together behaviours, timing, and spacing that could hint at connections between the villagers. Minutes stretched, the night thick with fog and anticipation. Every sound, the faint scuff of a shoe, the distant bark of a dog, the whisper of wind through the trees, felt amplified, heightening the quiet thrill of the stakeout. Agatha's mind worked rapidly, cataloguing clues, imagining motives and projecting patterns for the next night's observations. The shadows moved and flickered, but she remained focused, aware that even the slightest slip might reveal the delicate web of secrets she was determined to unravel. Finally, the figures retreated into the darkness, leaving the postbox standing innocently beneath the soft lamplight. Agatha exhaled, feeling a mixture of exhilaration and satisfaction. The night had offered glimpses of clandestine activity, subtle humour in her own watchfulness, and valuable patterns to consider. Carsely slept quietly, yet beneath its calm surface, mysteries lingered, and Agatha, ever observant, knew that the game of shadows had only just begun. Agatha Raisin crouched behind the low hedge, her eyes fixed on the postbox as the mist swirled softly around the village square. The shadowy figures she had been observing moved with deliberate precision, their gestures careful and measured. Her notebook lay open on her lap, pen poised, yet her attention wavered for a brief, disbelieving moment. One of the figures, the one who had handed over the folded envelope with such precision, stepped partially into the lantern light, and Agatha's sharp eyes recognized a familiar posture, a distinct tilt of the head she had seen countless times during village gatherings. Her pulse quickened. It was Mrs. Pendleton, the seemingly mild-mannered widow who ran the local tea shop. Agatha's mind raced to reconcile this image of civility with the secretive movements of the night. The shock of recognition was mingled with a frisson of curiosity and an inkling of betrayal. How could someone she had trusted so completely be involved in clandestine nocturnal activities? The thrill of the mystery deepened, and Agatha felt her analytical mind surge to life, cataloguing every possible motive, every subtle cue in Mrs. Pendleton's careful gestures. The other figure remained partially concealed, handing a second folded note to Mrs. Pendleton, who accepted it with the same careful precision. Pausing to glance around as though checking for watchers, Agatha noted the meticulousness of the actions, the slow, deliberate folding of the envelope, the weight given to each glance, and the faint, almost imperceptible signs of nervous anticipation. Her mind began to formulate hypotheses. Could Mrs. Pendleton be acting on instructions from someone else, or was she orchestrating her own nocturnal endeavours entirely? A mixture of emotions swirled through Agatha. There was a sting of betrayal, certainly, tempered by a reluctant admiration for the widow's ingenuity. She also felt the familiar twinge of excitement that came from discovering that a mystery was more intricate than it had first appeared. Agatha's observations became more nuanced. She catalogued not just actions, but subtle tells, a twitch of a hand, the way the light caught a glimmer of anticipation in Mrs. Pendleton's eyes, and the silent language of body posture that communicated intention without a word. The night deepened, and the figures moved again, their interaction brief but charged with meaning. Agatha noted the timing, the distances between movements, and the manner in which Mrs. Pendleton navigated the shadows. Each detail suggested careful planning, intelligence, and perhaps a mixture of playfulness and seriousness. Agatha's own thoughts wandered to the larger implications. Village relationships were layered with history, allegiances and secrets, and every familiar face might hold surprises. By now, Agatha had made mental notes for the next phase of her investigation. She needed to observe without being seen, to record details without revealing her own presence. The recognition of Mrs. Pendleton had added stakes. The mystery was no longer an abstract puzzle, but a web intertwined with personal connections. The tension was delicate, balancing intrigue, mild betrayal, and the enduring warmth of the village environment. As Mrs. Pendleton finally retreated into the shadows, her movements deliberate and unhurried, Agatha allowed herself a quiet exhale. She rose slowly from her hiding spot, careful to avoid snapping a twig or rustling leaves, and adjusted her shawl against the chill. Her mind, ever active, catalogued observations, formulated theories, and prepared for the delicate confrontation that might be necessary. Carsely remained still under the moonlight, innocent to the casual observer, yet for Agatha, the revelation had shifted the course of the mystery. One familiar figure, once trusted, now carried a secret that would propel the story forward. And the night promised more revelations yet to come. Chapter 5. Secrets in the Attic. Agatha Raisin climbed the narrow stairs to her attic, the wooden boards creaking softly beneath her feet. The morning sunlight filtered through the small, dusty window, illuminating boxes stacked in careful disarray and casting long, thin shadows across the slanted ceiling. She had decided that if the mysterious letters of recent nights were to be understood, she might need to look into the village's past. Sometimes secrets lingered across generations, quietly shaping the present. Pulling a small stool closer to the window, Agatha began rummaging through a collection of old trunks and cardboard boxes she had accumulated over the years. Each container held the detritus of lives long past, handwritten journals, brittle envelopes, yellowed photographs, and bits of ribbon that once adorned birthday presents or holiday decorations. Her fingers brushed lightly across the surfaces, careful not to damage anything fragile. The attic smelled of old paper, cedar, and a hint of mothballs, a comforting aroma that reminded her of childhood afternoons spent exploring forgotten corners. Her eyes caught a trunk labelled simply, Carsely Letters. The lid protested with a soft groan as she lifted it, revealing a pile of envelopes tied together with faded ribbon. Each letter bore dates ranging from decades ago, and the handwriting seemed to match some of the styles she had seen in the current mysterious postbox letters. Agatha carefully untied the bundle and began leafing through them. Some letters spoke of disputes over property lines, others hinted at friendships broken and restored, and several mentioned meetings that had taken place under cover of darkness, often near familiar village landmarks. Next, she opened a small tin box containing photographs, each one delicate with age. Black and white faces peered back at her, villagers of old, posed in front of the mill, the post office, and the pond. Some were smiling, others serious, but all shared subtle connections. A glance, a hand resting on a shoulder, a shared laugh frozen in time. Agatha noted the recurring figures, realizing that some of today's residents were direct descendants of these past correspondents. There were faces she recognized, though older, marked by years and time. She felt a thrill of connection. The present mystery now had roots stretching back decades. A particularly striking photograph showed two young men standing near a willow tree, one holding a lantern much like the ones described in the recent notes. Written in faded ink on the back was a single word, pact. Agatha's pulse quickened. Could it be that the current letters were a continuation or perhaps a revival of long-standing agreements and rivalries? The thought of history repeating itself made her fingers tingle with anticipation. She carefully replaced the photograph and returned to the letters. One in particular had a series of coded lines, similar to what she had seen recently. Names, initials, and shorthand references suggested that the village's secrets were not new, merely resurfacing. Agatha jotted notes in her small pad, cross-referencing dates, locations, and individuals. Each discovery added depth to her understanding, and yet also posed new questions. The attic, with its dusty light and quiet corners, felt both cozy and charged with suspense. Agatha leaned back against a box, allowing herself a moment to absorb the connections forming in her mind. Old rivalries, secret meetings, and long-hidden alliances had shaped the village more than she had realized. The postbox, the letters, the shadowy visitors, all of it was part of a story that spanned generations, and she was at its center. Finally, she gathered the most relevant letters and photographs, placing them carefully on the floor beside her. The morning light fell across the edges of the papers, illuminating clues both old and new. Agatha felt a mixture of satisfaction and eager anticipation, ready to continue piecing together the web of mysteries that Carsely had concealed for so long. The attic had offered its secrets willingly,
and she knew the story was only beginning to unfold. Agatha Raisin settled at her kitchen table.
The morning sun filtering through lace curtains and casting delicate patterns on the worn surface. The letters and photographs she had retrieved from the attic were spread before her, forming a collage of past and present. She sipped her tea, allowing the warmth to settle in her chest, while her mind worked at its usual brisk pace, connecting dots, testing hypotheses, and imagining possible scenarios. She began with the old letters, tracing recurring names and locations, many reference gatherings near the willow tree, the postbox itself, and even lanterns placed strategically around the village. Agatha frowned thoughtfully, tapping a pen against her chin.
So?
Someone's either remarkably devoted to tradition or delightfully mischievous. The faint humor in her voice did little to mask the thrill of discovery coursing through her. Next, she examined the photographs. Faces from decades past aligned with current residents. Agatha noticed similarities in posture, expression, and subtle mannerisms. A dimple here, a habitual tilt of the head there. She chuckled softly. Generations of secrecy hidden in plain sight, she murmured, jotting down notes. The realization that the present letters might echo historical agreements or rivalries added a layer of richness to the mystery, connecting the village's quiet streets to an invisible network spanning decades. Turning her attention to the recent, torn note, Agatha began aligning its partial instructions with clues gleaned from both old and new correspondence. The mention of lanterns, secret meeting points, and cautious timing suggested deliberate coordination. The footprints and disturbed flowers in her garden, too, began to make sense in this context. Someone had been careful, yet precise, leaving evidence for only the keenest observer to interpret. She tapped her pen against the table again, a faint smirk forming. They've underestimated me, she thought, delighting in the thrill of outsmarting an unseen hand. Hypotheses formed in rapid succession. Perhaps the sender of the midnight letters was attempting to revive an old agreement, or perhaps to settle unfinished matters long forgotten. Could Mrs. Wilkins's involvement hint at loyalty to a bygone promise, or were there multiple participants, each with hidden motives? Agatha sketched a rudimentary diagram, connecting names, places, and approximate timings. Lines crisscrossed like a spider's web, each intersection a potential meeting, a potential clue. As she stepped back to consider the full picture, she allowed herself a quiet laugh. The absurdity of picturing the village's dignified citizens tiptoeing around in darkness, trading cryptic notes, and hiding from imaginary observers struck her as both amusing and fascinating. Yet beneath the humor lay a serious thread of understanding. The pieces were beginning to fit. The historical patterns illuminated present actions, revealing a hidden rhythm in the village's life that only someone persistent and perceptive, like Agatha herself, could discern. She reviewed the timeline she had constructed. comparing notes from the attic with footprints, letters, and cryptic instructions. Tentatively, she formulated theories about the sender's identity, their intentions, and possible next steps. Every hypothesis invited further questions. Every answer hinted at additional layers. The puzzle was intricate, playful, and compelling, perfectly suited to Agatha's mind, which thrived on connections and clever deductions. Finally, she leaned back in her chair, sipping the last of her tea and surveying the spread of clues before her. Carsely appeared tranquil from her window, the village bathed in mid-morning light, yet Agatha knew better. Beneath its calm exterior, secret histories and present intrigues intertwined, forming a story only she could begin to untangle. The pieces were fitting together, yet the final picture remained just out of reach, tantalizing, urging her onward. With a satisfied sigh, she picked up her notepad, ready to track the next move in the quiet but determined game unfolding across her beloved village. Chapter 6. A Village in Suspicion. The morning in Carsely dawned bright and cheerful, yet an undercurrent of tension rippled through the village streets. Agatha Raisin, walking past the bakery, immediately sensed the shift. Villagers huddled in small clusters, whispering and casting quick, suspicious glances at one another. Even the familiar cobblestones seemed to hum with anticipation, as though the village itself had become a participant in the unfolding drama. Agatha pulled her coat tighter and approached carefully, keen to observe without drawing attention to herself. Mrs. Pendleton was the first to catch her eye, leaning against her hedge and speaking rapidly to the grocer.
"And I tell you, someone's been leaving letters at all hours."
Could it be young Oliver? Or perhaps Mrs. Wilkins herself? Agatha suppressed a smile. Predictable speculation, she thought, though the layering of suspicion fascinated her. Each villager's assumptions revealed personality as much as rumour. At the post office, a small crowd had gathered. Mrs. Tilling was wringing her hands nervously while whispering to the baker about strange footprints near the square.
"I saw them myself,"
she exclaimed. "And who knows who's lurking about at night?"
"Not a soul is safe from these mysterious letters."
Agatha made a mental note of the description of footprints, comparing them to her own observation. The villagers' chatter, though often misguided, provided context and insight into the broader atmosphere she needed to navigate. Passing the square, Agatha overheard Mr. Fenwick, the retired schoolmaster, speaking in a conspiratorial tone to two neighbours.
Surely someone is trying to unsettle us, but why? And why the secrecy?"
The retired man's dramatic emphasis contrasted with his usual precise demeanour, offering a touch of humour that made Agatha chuckle inwardly. Even in suspicion, the villagers' quirks created a charming rhythm to the unfolding story. A small boy darted past, giggling, as though enjoying the collective unease, and Agatha followed his movement with a keen eye. Every interaction, gesture, and misstatement provided potential clues, or, at the very least, red herrings. She carefully catalogued these in her mind, noting who reacted with fear, amusement, or curiosity. The web of rumours was intricate, the villagers' interpretations varied, and her role as observer became all the more critical. By mid-morning, Agatha found herself at the edge of the village green, where several women were comparing notes about sightings of shadowy figures.
"It must be the young baker,"
one exclaimed. "Or perhaps Mr. Whittaker, the carpenter. He's always so secretive." Agatha raised an eyebrow. Predictable, imaginative, and entirely wrong, most likely. Still, the humour in their earnest speculation balanced the underlying tension, maintaining the village's cosy charm even amidst unease. Agatha approached Mrs. Pendleton with a polite nod, offering neutral conversation to test reactions. "Quite a stir this morning?" she remarked casually. Mrs. Pendleton's eyes widened slightly, and she lowered her voice to a whisper. "Yes, Agatha. Who could have imagined such happenings?" "The village is not what it used to be," Agatha responded with quiet interest, probing gently for details without revealing her own knowledge. Her careful navigation of the social landscape allowed her to collect information while maintaining discretion. As the morning progressed, she observed the subtle interplay of suspicion, gossip, and misunderstanding. Every whispered remark, every sidelong glance, and every exaggerated expression contributed to a rich tapestry of social dynamics. Agatha catalogued patterns: who was quick to accuse, who hesitated, and who seemed genuinely confused. The letters had transformed ordinary routines into a complex network of assumptions and conjectures. By the time she returned to her cottage, Agatha felt both amusement and satisfaction. The villagers' curiosity had created a living puzzle, and her mind had catalogued each piece carefully. She sipped her tea, reflecting on the morning's events. Misunderstandings abounded, laughter occasionally punctuated suspicion, and all the while the mystery deepened. Carsely remained calm on the surface, yet beneath the everyday rhythms, intrigue thrived, and Agatha, observant and sharp, was perfectly positioned to untangle it. Agatha Raisin was just settling with her notepad and a fresh cup of tea when a gentle knock sounded at the door. She rose, curiosity piqued, and opened it to find Mr. Oliver, the young chef who had recently opened the Lavender Spoon, standing hesitantly on the doorstep. His cheeks were flushed, either from brisk morning air or nerves, and his apron still bore faint smudges of flour. "Good morning, Agatha," he began, his voice low and cautious.
"I wondered if you might—"
"Perhaps help me with something?"
Agatha raised an eyebrow, intrigued.
The young man's approach was earnest yet subtly hesitant, suggesting that whatever he wished to discuss required discretion. She gestured for him to step inside, offering him a chair by the window where sunlight streamed across the table. As he seated himself, he glanced around nervously, as if half expecting the villagers' curious eyes to peek through the lace curtains. "What's this about, Oliver?" she asked, leaning forward slightly. He hesitated, then produced a small bundle of papers, envelopes, and a few handwritten notes he had discovered in his kitchen.
"I found these last night," he said softly, "just after—"
"Well, after hearing about the letters circulating around Carsely, I thought you might know what to do with them." Agatha took the bundle, her fingers brushing over the familiar texture of folded paper, and immediately began scanning the contents. The handwriting was unmistakable in style. Though the messages were brief and cryptic, Oliver explained in hushed tones that he had seen suspicious activity near the postbox several nights ago, but had been unsure how to approach it. He admitted he had been curious but hesitant, fearing to involve himself in matters beyond his understanding. Agatha listened intently, noting every detail and mental cue, the moments when he paused, the careful phrasing he used, and the subtle hints that he had his own observations. He wasn't just a helpful bystander. He had pieces of the puzzle that she had not yet discovered. As they examined the notes together, Agatha realized that Oliver's insights offered fresh perspectives on timing, locations, and the potential motives of the nocturnal visitors. He pointed out patterns she had missed, small consistencies in wording and envelope markings that suggested the letters were coordinated rather than random. Agatha jotted notes meticulously, mentally connecting them to footprints, garden disturbances, and previous historical clues. The young chef's observations were precise and intuitive, complementing her own methodical approach. Yet beneath the warmth of collaboration,
Agatha sensed a hint of hesitation in Oliver, a subtle reluctance to disclose everything he knew.
Perhaps he had motives, loyalties, or concerns of his own. The duality intrigued her. Trust would be necessary, but it required careful calibration. She smiled faintly at the thought. Every partnership in detective work carried risk, but it also held the promise of progress. By mid-morning, they had cross-referenced notes, hypothesized about potential meeting points, and speculated on which villagers might be involved. Agatha felt a quiet thrill as patterns began to emerge more clearly. Oliver's presence brought not only new information, but also a sense of shared purpose, alleviating the solitary tension that had accompanied her investigations. She realized that the village's secrets were vast, yet cooperation, even cautious cooperation, might illuminate pathways previously unseen. Finally, Agatha leaned back, sipping her tea and studying Oliver with measured curiosity. "We'll need discretion," she said gently.
"And patience."
"But together I believe we can unravel this mystery." He nodded. the weight of understanding and shared determination in his expression. A partnership had begun, delicate yet promising, and for the first time that morning, Agatha felt optimism threading through the suspense. Carsely's secrets would not remain hidden forever, and with an unexpected ally at her side, she was closer than ever to uncovering them. Chapter 7: Confrontations and Revelations. The night was crisp, and Carsely's streets were cloaked in a silvery haze, the moon casting a gentle glow over rooftops and cobblestones. Agatha Raisin moved quietly along the familiar path to the postbox, her shawl wrapped tightly around her shoulders and a notebook tucked discreetly under her arm. Lanterns flickered in nearby windows, casting warm pools of light, yet the village remained mostly silent. Every step she took seemed amplified in the stillness, heightening her awareness. Tonight, she had decided, she would finally observe the letter sender in action. She chose a concealed spot behind a low hedge near the postbox, careful to remain unseen. Her eyes scanned the shadows, catching the slightest movement, listening for whispers carried faintly on the cool night air. Minutes stretched into tense anticipation, and Agatha adjusted her shawl to block the wind while keeping her vision unobstructed. The faint rustle of leaves and the distant hoot of an owl punctuated the silence, each sound sharpening her focus. Then a figure emerged from the mist, slender, deliberate, moving with careful precision.
Agatha's pulse quickened.
The person approached the postbox, pausing briefly to glance around before kneeling and carefully depositing an envelope. She observed the methodical way the letter was handled, noting every subtle gesture, the folding, the crease, the way the figure glanced over a shoulder as if ensuring no one watched. Each movement revealed patience, caution, and a practiced awareness of potential observers. As Agatha watched, another figure appeared from the opposite direction, equally deliberate and shadowed. The two exchanged a folded note without a word, their eyes meeting briefly. The interaction was brief, but loaded with meaning, their body language speaking volumes. Agatha jotted rapid mental notes: who approached first, the precise timing, the exchange of letters, the furtive glances that suggested trust and secrecy. She began piecing together motives from the smallest clues, feeling a surge of satisfaction as patterns emerged. Her heart skipped when the first figure stepped fully into the lantern light for a moment, revealing features that were familiar yet unexpected. Recognition struck. The sender was someone she had previously observed in the village, but never suspected of clandestine activities. The combination of surprise and validation made her pulse quicken. This revelation added complexity to the mystery, blending familiarity with intrigue. Agatha's mind raced, imagining reasons for secrecy, loyalty, and hidden intentions. The second figure, still partially concealed, returned the envelope to the first before retreating swiftly into the mist. Agatha watched every movement, cataloguing details with meticulous attention. The rhythm of the exchange suggested premeditation, a network of communication she had only begun to decipher.
Every gesture, every pause, every glance was a clue,
forming a mosaic of intentions that could reveal the broader story if carefully analyzed. Despite the tension,
Agatha allowed herself a small inward smile.
The thrill of discovery, combined with the quiet beauty of Carsely at night, created a rare blend of suspense and comfort. She made note of landmarks, times, and positions, ensuring that every subtle sign was preserved in her memory. The night, with its soft mist and glowing lanterns, had become both stage and witness to secrets long hidden beneath the village's calm exterior. Finally, the figures vanished into the darkness, leaving the postbox innocently in its place. Agatha exhaled slowly, her mind buzzing with observations and emerging hypotheses. She rose carefully from her hiding spot, brushing leaves from her shawl, and began the quiet walk back to her cottage. The midnight rendezvous had provided clarity and revelation, confirming some of her suspicions while opening new avenues of inquiry. Carsely's nocturnal secrets were slowly revealing themselves, and Agatha, ever observant and clever, felt the thrill of the chase deep within her chest. Agatha Raisin returned to her cottage that morning with a brisk sense of purpose. Her observations from the midnight rendezvous had crystallized into a theory, and she was eager to confirm her suspicions. Over breakfast, she arranged the letters, notes, and sketches on the table, reviewing every detail with meticulous care. Each folded crease, every cryptic phrase, and even the faint traces of soil on the envelopes pointed to one particular individual. The answer was both satisfying and delightfully unexpected. By mid-morning, she ventured into the village square with a sense of quiet anticipation. The postbox, innocuous beneath the sun, had become the epicenter of a mystery she had unraveled with patience and care. Agatha approached it, casually observing passers-by, noting their demeanor, their steps, and whether they glanced toward her with subtle recognition. Her sharp eyes caught a familiar figure lingering near the flower beds across the street, fidgeting with their hands as if unsure whether to approach. "Good morning, Agatha," came a tentative voice. It was Mrs. Wilkins, the librarian who had so recently surprised her during her stakeout. There was a slight flush on her cheeks and a nervous energy in her posture that betrayed more than words could say. Agatha tilted her head thoughtfully, the pieces of the puzzle slotting into place. "Morning, Mrs. Wilkins," she replied, her tone warm yet expectant. "It seems we have matters to discuss," Mrs. Wilkins sighed, a mixture of relief and embarrassment crossing her face. She admitted to orchestrating the nocturnal letters, explaining that her intentions had been entirely harmless, though unconventional. The letters, she confessed, were meant to encourage quiet acts of kindness among villagers and to rekindle old friendships that had faded over time. Misunderstandings had amplified the secrecy, giving the entire scenario a layer of unintended suspense and amusement. Agatha listened, her sharp mind noting the alignment between Mrs. Wilkins' explanations and the patterns she had observed in the letters and exchanges. The revelation was almost comical in its simplicity. The carefully planned midnight visits, the cryptic notes, the furtive glances, all had been the product of good intentions, rather than malice. Mrs. Wilkins' loyalty to tradition, her delight in quiet theatrics, and her desire to foster community bonds had driven her careful nocturnal operations. Agatha allowed herself a quiet chuckle, appreciating the charm and creativity behind the seemingly mysterious behavior. The suspense had been real, yet the resolution carried warmth and light-heartedness. Agatha guided Mrs. Wilkins to a bench near the square, where they discussed the finer details of the letters and the events of the past nights. She gently advised the librarian on how to continue her social initiatives in a less secretive and less alarming manner, ensuring the village would benefit without unnecessary worry. As they spoke, Agatha reflected on the subtle clues she had noticed, the footprints, the garden disturbances, and the careful timing of the exchanges, all now fitting neatly into a coherent narrative. Villagers, observing the conversation from a respectful distance, slowly realized the harmless nature of the nocturnal mystery. Murmurs of relief spread, accompanied by quiet smiles and occasional laughter. The village retained its cozy charm, now enriched by the story of secret letters, midnight missions, and the gentle ingenuity of Mrs. Wilkins. Agatha felt a contented satisfaction. She had resolved the mystery without conflict, preserved the warmth of Carsely, and restored calm to her beloved village. As she walked home, the postbox standing innocently beneath the morning sun, Agatha allowed herself a rare moment of amusement and reflection. The puzzle had been complex, the clues subtle, and the solution unexpectedly charming. She made a mental note to revisit her observations in the future, appreciating how even the smallest acts, coupled with a touch of secrecy, could ripple through a community. Carsely was quiet once more, its secrets gently laid to rest, at least for now. Chapter 8. Peace returns to Carsely. The first light of dawn filtered gently through the lace curtains of Agatha Raisin's cottage, casting delicate patterns across the polished wooden floor. Outside, the village of Carsely stirred slowly, its streets bathed in soft golden hues. Birds chirped in the garden, hopping from branch to branch, as the scent of dew-kissed flowers mingled with the aroma of freshly baked bread drifting from nearby kitchens.
Agatha, still wrapped in her favourite shawl,
moved quietly to the kitchen, appreciating the calm after the flurry of recent events. She placed a kettle on the stove, listening to the soft whistle as it warmed the water. The familiar, comforting sounds of morning, the gentle hum of the kettle, the distant clatter of shutters being opened, and the low murmur of neighbours greeting one another created a sense of peace she had not fully realized she had been craving. Agatha poured the hot water over a carefully selected tea bag, inhaling the soothing aroma and allowing herself a moment of reflection. Through the window, she observed villagers emerging from their homes. Mr. Fenwick, the retired schoolmaster, shuffled along with a stack of newspapers tucked under his arm, muttering comments about the day's weather and perhaps the lingering curiosities of village life. Mrs. Pendleton, now smiling rather than furtive, arranged flowers outside her tea shop, greeting passers-by with a cheerful nod. Even Oliver, the young chef, carried a basket of fresh pastries, his apron now free from flour smudges, as he offered friendly greetings to neighbours. Life in Carsely had returned to its gentle rhythm, yet the faint echoes of past events lingered like the last notes of a soft melody. Agatha set a small plate with buttered toast and jam on the table, adding a fresh scone she had baked the previous evening. She sat down, tea in hand, and allowed herself to watch the garden through the window. The soft morning light revealed the subtle beauty of dew on petals, a robin hopping along the lawn, and the gentle sway of the lavender that lined the pathway. These everyday details, usually overlooked, now seemed imbued with a sense of serenity and continuity as she ate. Agatha thought back on the recent nights of observation, the shadowy figures, the mysterious letters, and the revelations that had ultimately brought understanding and amusement to the village. Each encounter, each note, and each whispered suspicion had reinforced her appreciation for Carsely's intricate social tapestry. The village was small, yet each person's actions and intentions created ripples that touched the lives of others in ways both profound and subtle. Reflection was gently interrupted by the faint laughter of children playing near the green, the occasional bark of a dog, and the soft creak of a cartwheel along the cobbled streets. Agatha smiled at these sounds, noting how they combined to form the quiet symphony of village life. Even in the resolution of the mystery, life retained its gentle unpredictability. Small moments of curiosity and humour lingered, ready to blossom into future adventures or minor puzzles. Finishing her tea, Agatha rose and stepped into the garden. The early sunlight kissed her face as she inhaled deeply, appreciating the cool, fresh air and the comforting normalcy of the scene. She noticed footprints from a night long past, now faint and harmless, and the subtle bend of flower stems that had once hinted at nocturnal mischief. A soft breeze carried the promise of more stories yet to unfold. But for now, all was calm. Returning to the cottage, she placed her empty cup on the counter and glanced once more at the quiet streets, content and observant. Carsely had returned to its peaceful rhythm. The villagers engaged in gentle routines, and the mysteries of the night had given way to the warmth of morning. Agatha allowed herself a small, satisfied smile. In the quiet of the day, surrounded by sunlit gardens and the faint hum of village life, she felt the full comfort of her home and the gentle, enduring magic of Carsely. Agatha Raisin settled into her favourite armchair, the late afternoon sunlight spilling warmly across the polished wooden floor of her cosy cottage. Before her lay the carefully collected letters, notes, and photographs that had traced the twists and turns of the recent mystery. She arranged them neatly on the table, grouping them by sender, date, and content. Each piece seemed to tell its own story, yet together they formed a tapestry of secrets, connections, and gentle mischief that spanned the village. She picked up a partially torn note and smoothed out the creases, rereading the cryptic words that had once provoked curiosity and a touch of suspense. Now, in the calm of the afternoon, they carried a charm of their own. The letters had prompted observation, reflection, and moments of quiet amusement.
Agatha felt satisfaction in how the mystery had unfolded,
Recognizing that even the smallest gestures, folded paper, whispered exchanges,
or furtive glances, could ripple through a community in unexpected ways. Her eyes wandered to the old photographs she had discovered in the attic.
faces from decades past stared back at her, some smiling, others caught in thoughtful expressions. Agatha considered how history and human nature intertwined, shaping the village and its residents. She marveled at how small acts, once carefully concealed, could illuminate character, reveal intentions, and teach lessons about trust and community. Each photo and letter now seemed to underscore a larger, enduring truth: the past informs the present, and curiosity, when guided wisely, can enrich the lives of those around us. Organizing the letters, Agatha reflected on the lessons the mystery had offered. Trust, she realized, was delicate yet resilient. Curiosity, tempered by observation and discernment, could uncover truths and create bonds. And community, with all its quirks and missteps, thrived when its members paid attention, listened, and acted with kindness. Even Mrs. Pendleton's secretive nocturnal activities, initially perplexing, had ultimately strengthened connections among neighbors, bringing laughter, reflection, and a renewed appreciation for one another. Oliver's unexpected assistance came to mind, and Agatha noted the value of collaboration. Shared insight and discreet cooperation had illuminated patterns she could not have uncovered alone. Partnerships, she mused, required trust, patience, and a willingness to observe without judgment, qualities that ensured progress and preserved the warmth of the village. Even the shadows of mystery carried lessons when approached with care and intelligence. Agatha carefully catalogued the letters, marking subtle patterns and connections she had discovered. Each envelope, each folded crease, each handwritten flourish now represented more than a puzzle. They were reminders of the lives intertwined within Carsely. The experience had strengthened her own observational skills, honed her instincts, and offered a sense of accomplishment tempered by amusement at the gentle theatrics of her fellow villagers. Stepping to the window, she watched the streets bathed in soft, late-afternoon light. Children played near the village green, neighbors exchanged cheerful greetings, and a dog barked at a passing cart. Carsely's rhythm had returned, quiet yet full of life.
Agatha allowed herself a small smile, imagining that even as one mystery concluded,
another might be quietly taking shape, ready for discovery by those observant enough to notice. Finally, she returned to her armchair, setting the neatly bound bundle of letters on the side table. The room was filled with a warm glow from the setting sun, and the faint hum of village life seeped through the open window. Agatha sipped her tea and leaned back, feeling contentment settle over her like a soft blanket. Carsely had taught her about trust, curiosity, and the gentle bonds that held a community together. The mystery was concluded, yet the promise of future adventures lingered, leaving her and the village ready for whatever might come next.